Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank you all for joining this session. We'll be talking about securing web views and the story behind CVE 2021-21136. I'll be walking you through this deck with my friend and co-speaker Imdad Mohammed. Let me start this with quickly introducing ourselves. My name is Shiv Sahani. I work as Senior Associate with JP Morgan Chase. I'm also one of the contributors in OWASP MSTG and also the author of The Grey Matter of Securing Android Applications. Over to you, Imdad.
Hi guys, my name is Imdadullah Mohammed. I'm the senior security engineer currently working from Grab, and I'm leading various application security initiatives for engineering teams here at Grab. Over to you, Shiv.
Thank you, Imran. Before we go ahead, a quick disclaimer. Any opinions or personal views expressed over here solely belongs to us and are nowhere related to our current or previous employees. So this would be the agenda for today's session. We'll be starting this with introducing CVEs and web views. Once we have established the fundamentals, we'll be talking about the journey on CVE, where we'll discuss on the timeline and the way we interacted with the Google security team. Once we are through with this, we'll talk about the in-depth analysis that we performed and submitted to Google in order to claim that CVE. Last but not the least, we'll be talking about common web-related security issues that we have observed over time and the ways wherein we could prevent those issues and make our mobile apps secure and robust. So let me start this with introducing CVEs and web views. So most of you guys would already know what a CVE is. So CVE is an acronym used for common vulnerability exposure. It's actually a unique identifier that is associated with a vulnerability in a publicly available software package. For example, CVE 2021-21136 is a unique identifier that is associated with a vulnerability in Android Chromium implementation. While we were doing our security research, what we observed was a lot of mobile applications were actually leaking users or tokens to third parties. And when we dig deeper into it, we found out that this was happening because of a flaw in Android Chromium implementation. We'll be talking about in-depth details of the flaw in the upcoming slides. But this was just to introduce what a CVE is and how exactly it works. So now we know what a CVE is. Let's talk about a web view. So basically, WebView is one of the mobile app components that allows mobile developers to load web content directly into their mobile apps. As you can see from an image on the left side of the deck, we have a WebView component. We have just provided the URL, and the corresponding web content is loaded as a part of mobile application itself. So the user, for a user, it appears as if it's the part of the mobile app itself. However, the life of at the back end, the life of mobile developer is made far more easier by just loading or reusing the content which is already available. So WebView supports the concept of code reuse, and hence they're widely used in the current era of mobile application development. You can consider WebViews to be dedicated web browser for the mobile apps. So as you can see, we are able to load any particular URL, and this belongs to solely as a part of our mobile sandbox. So now we know what a WebView is. Let's understand how exactly it works. So as I mentioned, WebView allows mobile developers to load web content by just passing the URL. So if you see the code snippet over here, we have a WebView component, and we are using a load URL API to load the web content corresponding to a URL. So for example, here we have provided a URL which is google.com, and we are using load URL API. What happens is, behind the scenes, the mobile component or mobile app would make a network call to www.google.com and would fetch the web content as a part of HTTP request. As a part of response, we'll get the web content. Once the response reaches at the front end, it will be rendered as a part of our WebView component, and it would appear as if it belongs to our app only. So this was the normal load. Let's understand what happens if we want to load a protected content. For example, let's say if we want to load a content which is protected through authentication, maybe users' profile data. Obviously, this will be only available if we pass the required auth data to the backend. Else, backend would reject the request and won't entertain the request. So, in those scenarios wherein we would need to load authenticated content, we have an overloaded version of load URL API, wherein apart from providing the URL, we pass a map which has a key value pairs. So In the scenarios where we want to load the authenticated or protected content, apart from passing the URL to be loaded, we also pass a map which is having key value pairs. If you see over here, this key is the authorization header name and the corresponding auth token is the value. So what happens behind the scene is, once this overloaded version of load URL is used, while making the network request, the front end attaches all these headers which are sent as a part of map to the network request, to the HTTP request. And now our request would be having the required auth data. Once this request reaches backend will validate the auth token and would release the protected content. And that is how the protected content would reach to front end. And we would have the HTTP response, which would be rendered by front end, which is a WebView component over here. So if I summarize, WebView is kind of a dedicated web browser for mobile app, which makes the life of mobile developers very easier, and it's extensively used in current era of mobile app development. And the way it works is there are two kinds of loads. One is a normal load wherein we can just load the normal content, which is not protected through any kind of authentication. We just pass the URL which is to be loaded. And in the scenario wherein we want to load the authenticated or protected data, Android provides an overloaded version of load URL method wherein we could pass the auth data so that backend could release the protected content. So this is what a WebView is and how exactly it works in a short. Now let's understand deep links. Have you ever wondered while you are browsing the content, web content in your mobile browser, and you click on a link and it opens a specific content in the mobile app that is installed on the device? If you see an image over here, for example, while I was just searching for sunglasses, I clicked on a link and it opens that particular sunglass on the e-commerce app that is installed on my phone. All these things happens because of deep links. So deep link is nothing but a URI which helps improve user experience by opening a specific content in the mobile app. For example, if you see, this is an example of deep link. If you see, it's a URI. By URI, I mean Uniform Resource Identifier. And once this deep link is triggered, it would actually open user's profile. And by users, so this would be the user ID, and the corresponding profile would be loaded in the Facebook application. So this was just an example, just to understand how exactly deep link works and what a deep link is. Now that we have established the foundations that would be required to understand the security issue in detail, so that will be taking over from here, and we'll be talking about the journey on CVE, and we'll also discuss the timeline. Over to you, Imdad.
Thank you, Shiv, for giving a very basic understanding of how a deep link works, how a WebView works, and how developers do an auth load in terms of WebView. Here onwards, I will be talking on a journey towards getting the CVE 2021 to 201136. So in this screen, what you're able to see is a very basic OAuth use case where we have three components: a mobile application, we have an identity service, as well as we have a third-party service. So let's assume we have a mobile application which integrates with a lot of third-party. As soon as you click on the third-party tile on the mobile application, the first call will go to the identity service with the client ID as well as the redirect URI of the third party. Since it is an authenticated load, the user's authorization token will also be sent as a part of the HTTP header. Now, the identity service will first verify the authentication token and then will generate its own ID token for the third party, which the user is trying to access. And once it returns the ID token back to the web view of the mobile application, the web view will redirect to the third party URL along with the ID token. Then further couple of steps that takes place, which takes consent of that specific user before finally the user gets access to the third party services. So now we have seen a very basic example of OAuth use cases in a mobile application. Now let's understand on a very high level what the actual bug is. So in this step where the WebView is redirecting the user to the third party URL, the user's authorization token, which was set over here, was also being sent to the third party, which means that unintentionally the web view was exposing the user's session token to the third party. Now that we have a basic, very high level understanding, let's try to see what our initial observation was. So during our security research, what we have observed is that while the developers are implementing web views in Android, what we have observed is that when you are adding additional header using load URL, as you can see the example over here, I'm using load URL, taking the URL as well as the additional HTTP headers as a parameter. This is mostly happens in the case of authenticated load. So when I'm doing an authenticated load, the additional header which I'm adding over here is being sent and triggered in the process of loading the URL, such as redirect. What this means is that irrespective of the origin in the redirect response, the additional HTTP header is being sent. So this was the initial observation. Let's understand the timeline from our initial research and to finally getting a CVE. So in August 2019, we observed during your regular day-to-day activity, we observed this behavior in the application, and we suspected that there could be an issue in Chromium. Then in December 2019, what we did is we wanted to do a thorough analysis. So Shiv developed an Android application and a Python Flask web server to exactly replicate the issue, what we have observed. And based on that, we documented everything and we submitted the same to Google. In January 2020, we got a response from Google that it seems to be an intended behavior, and they wanted more time to do a thorough analysis. Finally, in Feb 2020, after a couple of back and forth conversation with Google, Google accepted it as a valid bug, and they wanted more time to fix because of backward compatibility issue. And finally, in November 2020, the official fix was released in Chromium 88. Now that we have understood the timeline of from the initial research and to finally getting a CVE, now let's get into the in-depth of the CVE. So as you can see towards my right, this is my proof of concept application, which is an Android WebView component where I am doing an authenticated load. As you can see, this specific code snippet, I am setting the URL over here, setting my authorization over here, and doing a WebView.load with the URL, and authorization is the header while I'm doing the authenticated load. So if you want to have a look at this code snippet, you can visit this specific GitHub URL given over here as a reference. Now, this is our backend Python server, which is basically a web server which will redirect any request that it receives. So you can see when the web view will try to access /redirect, it will basically redirect to scratchpatch.org, and the response code will be 302. So we developed this to replicate the exact scenario that we have observed in many applications. Now coming back to the actual issue, like we have a screenshot over here which we try to capture. This is the request we have captured in a burp suite, where if you observe over here, the authorization token was sent, which is a secret, which contains the user session information, which was actually sent to third party. So this was our initial observation. Now that we have seen and spoken about the CVE and the journey, as well as we went through the in-depth analysis, let's have a look at the exact demo of what exactly the issue is. So towards the right, what you can see is a Android emulator which is running my proof of concept application. Towards my left, it's the burp suite proxy, which will intercept all the requests as well as the response which is coming through the application. So as soon as I click on the application, and the first HTTP call will be triggered to my Python Flask server hosted locally, and here I'm doing an authenticated load, which is a normal call, and as expected, it receives a 302 response and redirecting it to third party scratchpatch.org. So if I forward this request, now if you observe over here, the authorization header, which contains the user session token, is actually being exposed to scratchpatch.org, which is an example of a third party in our case. So this was the exact behavior that we have observed during our security research. So now that we have understood about the bug and try to see the demo as well, let's talk a bit about the rollout plan and the official fix. So if you guys are interested in knowing what was the actual fix that Google has moved out, here's a link over here which you can go and actually look at the code over here. So the fix was very simple, like remove any extra header from the request if the request is redirected to a different origin, since they might be sensitive. So as it what does it imply is that uh, for example, in our case, like we were trying to load scratchpads, uh, we were trying to load our localhost server, right? And those headers were supposed to be meant for the localhost server, but in our case, it was also sending it to scratchpatch.org, which is a third party example. So this fix says that if there is an origin mismatch from the request and the response, then simply drop that header, because it could be a sensitive information such as the user session. Record metrics on when we add headers and what was done with them on redirect. So basically they had their test cases in place that will actually record whether there is an header is being added in the process of loading the URL inside and web view, inside load URL. And the last step was they had a test case which would confirm that there is no extra header added while the process of loading the URL, and all the headers are cleared up. So now that we have understood about the rollout and fix plan, she will take on from here to educate you about the most common web view security issues. Over to you, Shiv.
Thank you, Imdad, for the detailed analysis. Now let's talk about the common web-related security issues that we have observed over time. Next slide. So these are the four most common web-related security issues that we have observed over time. The first one is lack of URL validation, followed by insufficient URL validation. So both of these issues are whenever both of these issues occurs whenever there is an amalgamation of deep links and a trigger to open a URL in a web view. So the first one is lack of URL validation, wherein when we are opening a URL in a particular web view component, we are not doing any validation at all. The second one is insufficient URL validation. In this case, we are doing a validation, but the validation is not sufficient and can be easily bypassed. The third one is very similar to the Chromium issue that Imdad discussed about. So it's unintended leakage of sensitive data to third parties. It covers all those issues wherein unintentionally or unknowingly we are sharing users, auth tokens, users, PII, or any other user-sensitive data, or maybe a business-sensitive data to third parties. Last but not the least is insufficient web view isolation. It would capture all those scenarios wherein unintentionally or unknowingly we are opening or consuming our own web views to load any untrusted content. For example, if we are loading partners' content in our own web views, so there might be a risk that legitimate content that we are expecting could be replaced with some malicious content, and it would again impact the user's privacy and security. So this was just a brief about all these issues that we have observed to be most common over time. Now let's talk about all of them in detail. Before we understand issue 1 and 2, so as I mentioned, the first issue, which is lack of URL validation, and the second issue, which is insufficient URL validation, is when there is an amalgamation of web views and an external trigger to open a particular URL in web view. So let's understand this use case. So let's say we have two screens. For simplicity, I'm just calling them screens. It could be activity in the case of Android and view controller in the case of iOS. So let's call them screens for now, just for the sake of simplicity. So let's say this first screen is having a button, and once this button is triggered, it will open second screen, which is having a web view component. So while the button triggers the invocation of second component, which has a web view, it also sends a URL to the second component, which has a web view, and that particular URL is loaded as a part of the web view component, which is there in the second screen. So if I just reiterate, we have this first component. It is having a button. Once this button is clicked, it will trigger the second component, and this whole screen is having a web view in it. And while we are triggering this particular screen, we are also passing a URL, which would eventually be loaded as a part of this web view component. Okay, so this trigger could be a deep link. If you recall, while we were just setting up fundamentals, I told you about deep link. A deep link is nothing but a URL, which once triggered would just open a specific content in the mobile apps just to improve the user experience. So this trigger to open this second component and URL in a web view in the second component could be deep links, or it could be vanilla messages like intents in the case of Android. So if we have a scenario like this, and some external component is able to open web view, open a specific URL in our web view component, there is a possibility of occurrence of the two issues that we discussed. One was no validation at all, and the second was insufficient validation. So now let's discuss about the first issue, which was lack of URL validation. As I mentioned, once this URL is to be loaded in web views, we are not doing any validation at all. So this is lack of URL validation. So let's understand this with the help of an example. So here we have a WebView demo app deep link. So this deep link has a URL component in it. So what happens is once this deep link is triggered, it will open this URL in the WebView component. Okay. So again, if you see, we have no validation at all. So once we have passed this deep link, we have extracted this URL out of deep link, and then we are just using load URL and passing this URL, which we have extracted out of deep link, and we are loading this URL without any validation. So this opens a door for arbitrary URL loads. So if what an attacker could do is, an attacker could craft this deep link in such a way that this URL, which is a legitimate URL, could be replaced with some malicious URL. And once this deep link is triggered, it will open malicious URL in the web view. We'll discuss about the impact or what could go wrong if issues like these happens in the upcoming slides. But for now, I just wanted to explain what happens when there is no URL validation. Now let's understand the second use case, which is insufficient URL validation. So we have a similar deep link over here as well. So we have the demo app. It is also having a URL. So once this deep link is triggered, this particular URL would be loaded in the web views. So if you see over here, we are doing a validation. So once we have passed the URL out of deep link, we are checking if it matches with shivsahani.com or subdomain of shivsahani.com. So shivsahani.com equals uri.getHost. So we are extracting the host out of the URL, which we have passed out of the deep link. And if it matches with this shivsahani.com, or if it matches with the subdomain of shivsahani.com, only then we are proceeding with loading the URL. Else we are not doing a load, and then we are so this is a very good example. If you see, like, we are following a suggested approach of whitelisting. So we have a whitelisted domain, which is shivsahani.com, and then we are only allowing loads for that particular domain. But still there is a problem. So if you see, we are using getHost to extract the host out of the URL, which we have passed out of deep link. So that's the problem. Let me talk about this in detail. So the problem with getHost method is, long time back there was an issue identified in the implementation of getHost method. So what happens is, if we pass a crafted URL to get host, it behaves differently. So if you see over here, I have a crafted URL which has two domains. One is attacker.com, and this is followed by backslash and @ symbol, and then we have legitimate.com. So in a single URL, we are having two domains. What happens is, if we pass this kind of crafted URL to get host, it would take legitimate.com, and all our validations which are expecting legitimate.com would pass through this check, just because we are using get host, and get host would behave differently whenever we are giving this kind of crafted URL to it. However, once these validations are passed, when we are passing the same crafted URL to load URL API, it would actually open up attacker.com. So this was an issue that was identified in the implementation of getHost method. This issue is fixed in API level 28. However, API level 27 and below are still vulnerable to it. So that is why it's not suggested to use getHost based validations, even if we are having a target version of 28 and above, since there would be still there would be still a lot of users who would be under 27, and they would still be vulnerable to it if we are supporting those users. So it's not recommended to use getHost based validation. We'll talk about how we can fix these issues and prevent these issues in the upcoming slides. But for now, I would just suggest to not use getHost based validations, because this is how these validations could be bypassed, and we could load any arbitrary URL by just passing some malicious URL to it. You could read more about it in a BuggyPro report, and I have attached the link to the report in this deck. Like it's an amazing report. I would strongly recommend you guys to have a look at it. So now we know about these two issues, right? The first one is no URL validation. The second one is insufficient URL validation. If you see in both the cases, we are able to load a malicious URL in the web. In first case, it's very simple. We just need to craft a deep link. In the second case, we just need to bypass the implementation. So in both the cases, we can open any crafted URL or malicious URL in the web component. So the impact somewhat remains the same. And it totally depends upon the privileges of the underlying web view. So through these two attacks, we are able to compromise the web views. And now it totally depends upon the privileges of this web view to escalate the impact. It could be as simple as just loading malicious HTML and phishing the users, or it could be as severe as doing a remote code execution on the user's device or exfiltrating users' auth tokens. So it totally depends upon the users, the privileges of the underlying web view, which is under attack. I could give you some of the examples. So let's say if this component, web component is having JavaScript enabled, we could do all the things that we could do through cross-site scripting. So we could execute some malicious JavaScript. Or if it is having some native bridges attached to it, so maybe the native code, by native code I mean Kotlin, Java, could actually, so what could happen is through JavaScript, we could call this native code, and all those methods that are exposed could be called through our JavaScript, and we could then escalate and exfiltrate users' auth tokens as well. So these were just few examples on how we could escalate the impact whenever we have issues like these. I would again suggest you guys to just go through this report. You'll get more understanding through it. So now let's move to the third issue, which is unintended data leakage. So as I mentioned, it's very similar to the Chromium issue that we discussed. So let's understand this with few examples. So unintended data leakage would be, it would cover all those issues where we are unintentionally sharing business sensitive information. So maybe let's say we are sharing our org's sensitive data to some third parties, or all the issues wherein we are unintentionally sharing users PII or auth sensitive information to third parties. So let's understand this with help of an example. Next slide. So if you see over here, we are unintentionally sharing users tokens to a third party, which is Google Tag Manager. This is something which is very common, and we have observed it in like a lot of applications. So unintentionally, they share users' auth tokens to Google Tag Manager through referral headers. So just make sure whenever whenever we are having a third-party integration, we are not sharing any sensitive information as a part of referral headers to third parties. Another example could be using or consuming the same web view which is used for auth tokens for authenticated load to share the user's auth data to third parties. So if you see over here, we are doing an authenticated load to a third party. So we have thirdparty.com and we are unintentionally sharing users auth tokens to third party. So this is just because we are consuming the same web view component which was meant to do an authenticated load to the identity service. But when we are accessing a resource service, we are just passing the auth headers there as well. So just make sure whenever there is a third-party integration, you are reviewing the network logs just to ensure that unintentionally no sensitive data is being leaked. So last one is sending sensitive data as part of query strings. So if you see over here, we are sending users auth token as a part of query string. The problem is now everyone who is having access to backend logs, be it QA engineers, security engineers, mobile developers, backend developers, all of them would have access to these logs. And by default, all this sensitive data which is sent as a part of query string in the get verb of HTTP would be log. So everyone having access to backend logs would have access to the sensitive information as well. So just make sure you're never ever sending sensitive data as a part of query string in the HTTP request. It's strongly advisable to use a post and send it as a part of body instead. So now let's move to the last issue, which is lack of web view isolation. So let's understand this with help of an example. So let's say we have an application which is integrated with a lot of third parties, and we are able to access services that are provided by third parties through a single app. So what happens is once a user opens up the application, there is a way through which a user could access third-party services. So let's say there are different tiles. If a user clicks on a particular tile, it opens a web view component, and the services that are provided by the third party could be accessed through that web content, and user could avail those services. So if we have a scenario like this, wherein we have third-party integrations through web views, and we are using our own web views to allow third parties to load their web content, there is a risk of a compromise. So what could go wrong is that there could be a breach of trust. So we are expecting that a third party would load legitimate content, but if there is a breach of trust, that legitimate content could be replaced with some malicious content, or the third party itself could be compromised and that legitimate content could be replaced with some malicious content. And again, the web view under attack. So the web view is under attack, and all the impact would depend upon the privileges of the underlying web view. So the moment this web view is replaced, the legitimate content is replaced with some malicious content, it totally depends upon the privileges of the underlying web view. So it could be as simple as just phishing the users through some malicious HTML if this web view is hardened enough, or let's say if this web view is privileged enough, it could even lead to exfiltrating users auth tokens to third parties. So whenever we are having this kind of an integration where we have a third party and third party services could be integrated, or third party services are being accessed through a web view, we should never ever allow our own web views to load a third party content or a partner content which is not trusted. So we'll discuss about the ways wherein we could prevent them and have a secure integration while having a proper user experience as well in the upcoming slides. So now that we have understood the common issues, now let's talk about the recommendations and learning. So one thing is fixing the security issues. Other thing is taking care of a lot of other things as well. So it could be the user experience, it could be the performance impact. So security engineering is not only about fixing security issues, it's about fixing security issues while considering a lot of other aspects, which is performance, which is user experience and whatnot. So we'll talk about the ways where we could prevent those security issues and make our apps robust and secure. Imdad will be taking over from here. Over to Imdad.
Thank you, Shiv. Thank you guys. now onwards, like we'll be talking about the learnings and recommendations that we are suggesting and that we have learned so far throughout the entire security research. So first and foremost, what we would suggest in terms of whenever you as a developer are implementing a web view or you are implementing a deep link, of course, the main component is the URL. So here we are talking about how you can do a secure URL validation. For example, we have this is an example in Android where we have a function validate URL, which is taking the URL object, and then in the if condition it is actually extracting the authority from the domain name as well as the scheme. So if the authority matches shivshani.com and the scheme matches http, then only it will return true, otherwise it will not load the specific URL. No, now why we are using get authority instead of get host? As you have seen in the previous example, how we have spoken about the exploit in the get host method, and how it is exploited to bypass this kind of checks. So that is why we are suggesting that we should have a check with get authority as well as with the get scheme. So in this specific slide, we are talking about how you can do a URL validation in iOS. Basically, we are given a Swift code snippet. Again, an example function validate URL, and we are using URL components dot scheme and URL components dot post to extract the scheme and post from a specific URL and match it against a whitelisted domain. So now that we have spoken about how you can do a secure URL validation, let's talk about web view isolation. Shiv has already given you a very brief understanding of what web view isolation is. So here we are talking about custom Chrome tabs in Safari View Controller. So whenever you have a web view, whenever you're trying to load a third-party URL which does not want to integrate with your app to exchange information from native to your web view, then we recommend that you use Chrome custom tab for Android and Safari View Controller for Android. Why? Because it runs as a part of the Chrome process as well as the Safari process, and if web content is being which is being executed, it will not affect the Android application or the iOS application. As well as the transition from the native application to the web view, it is seamless. It will be as if you are using a Chrome or Safari browser inside your application. So let's talk about difference in depth when we are talking about Android web views. So let's say you are an Android developer and or you are a security engineer when you want to recommend some security best practice while you're implementing or while you're suggesting in terms of Android web view. First and foremost, the uh, disable implicit access to content provider. So using this set allow content access property, you should always disable access to the content provider. Why? Because let's say you have exported content provider. So with the help of this, with the help of the URL, with the help of malicious JavaScript, the attacker would be able to access content provider which contains sensitive information, and this could be exfiltrated using JavaScript. Disable implicit access to the local storage. Again, like it is possible to access your local storage, and if you have left any sensitive file inside the local storage and this specific property is turned on, it is able to again access. It is possible to access it with the help of the URL and JavaScript. Reduce sensitive database exposure. So the clear cache property will help you flushing the WebView cache whenever you do not require the WebView component, clear the cache using this property. And last but not the least, that make sure that JavaScript bridge is not unnecessarily enabled. So in case your functionality does not require this specific setting, or you don't have any kind of JavaScript bridge, so we recommend you to disable it using set JavaScript enable function. Now that we have spoken about how we can secure, how we can harden your web view in Android, let's talk about iOS. So in iOS, initially there is this class UI WebView which developer used to use, but this specific UI WebView class comes with a lot of property and lot of settings which are enabled by default and which cannot be disabled, which again exposes a lot exposes an attack surface. So as well as if you're planning to use UI WebView, the App Store does not accept new apps or update to the existing app that uses the UI WebView. You can visit this URL for more information. And secondly, JavaScript cannot be disabled. As we have seen in the previous example, most of the thread that is introduced in WebView is through the JavaScript. So if you like to disable the JavaScript, you will not be able to disable it. Apart from that, sensitive security sensitive settings are enabled by default in UI WebView. So the successor of UI WebView comes the WCAG WebView. So in WCAG WebView, all the settings which were enabled by default, there's an option that you can disable it. So for example, if you want to disable the JavaScript bridge, you can disable it using this JavaScript enable property. The hash only secure content property will make sure that the web view is only loading the content which is sent over an encrypted connection. Again, now we have the allow read access to URL. Uh, if you are loading a web page which is hosted on your local storage, make sure that you specify the file name instead of the directory name. Why? Because it will be able to possible to access other files within the directory if this property is on. And as we have seen similar properties in Android, we also have the same in iOS. So make sure that these sensitive settings allow file access from file URL and allow universal access from file URL are disabled by default. So now that we have understood about how can we harden web views and how in Android as well as in iOS, these are the some key takeaways from the entire presentation. The first one is follow the principle of least privilege when you're implementing in WebView. For example, like we spoke about, like we spoke earlier, like whenever you're trying to, whenever there's no need of the JavaScript enable property, disable it. If it is not consumed by your feature, make sure that you follow the least privilege principle. Second one, always use custom Chrome tab as well as Safari view controller when you're trying to load a third-party web content, so that it runs as an isolated process. Third, as we have spoken about how you can do a secure URL validation in Android, iOS, and what is the risk of using Getosh in Android, always make sure when your web view or deep link is programmed to load the URL is always validated before the load. Fourth point, like as I said, while validating the URL before it is loaded, make sure you match it against the URL authority as well as protocol. Last but not the least, while you're doing a third-party integration, make sure there's no sensitive information is shared unintentionally. So this is a very important learning. Why? Because if you look at the rollout and fix of what actually Google has implemented, they also wanted to make sure that they don't leak any sensitive information even after fixes rollout. So they had that test case in place which makes sure that no sensitive headers are being sent during the process of WebView load. So in this slide, I would like to thank a couple of people. Firstly, Mona Vinothan. He was a great motivation in the entire research and in submitting the CV and replicating the issues. And we want to thank to big thanks to Mona Vinodhan as well as Changmu Klim. He was also involved in the analysis. He was helping up with step-by-step process. So we want to thank to our contributors Mona Vinodhan and Changmu Klim. So here are the few references that we have taken. Or you can share the slides. You can go and look at the references. Last but not the least, thank you for joining us, and we will be available for any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.